So, Path of Least Resistance. This quickly became one of my favorite weapons released here in Season of the Seraph. And while I know trace rifles aren't exactly a weapon class that everyone is going to gravitate towards, I've always personally enjoyed using them, and I think there is some nice value in this one as far as PvE is concerned. And that's not to say you couldn't find some pretty decent perk combos for a PvP Path of Least Resistance, but I really feel like that it is within the PvE activities where this weapon can really showcase its full potential. And being a weapon within the seasonal loot pool, it is fully craftable. And if you are looking at crafting one of these, I'd say there's probably a 95% chance that you're wanting to craft one with Voltshot. If you fall into that category, I have a few suggestions and recommendations right off the bat. Spec into reload. Take the +10 reload on the frame, and I do recommend the tactical battery for the magazine perk. And I say this because Voltshot is both kill and reload activated. The quicker you can reload the weapon, the more uptime you will get out of what is arguably the weapon's strongest perk. Plus, it doesn't need a whole lot in the other stat categories. Range is good, stability's good, recoil direction's perfectly fine, sitting at 95, we have a 100 for the aim assist value. So I mean, you might as well help out Voltshot. Feed the perk that's going to be doing most of the heavy lifting. Then when looking at your perk selections in column 3, please, for the love of God, do not take Subsistence. It is a top tier perk on a lot of weapons, but not on Path of Least Resistance with Voltshot. On a kill, it's going to take rounds from reserves and put them into your magazine. Trace rifles in general are inherently good at killing ads very quickly. So if Subsistence is constantly topping off your mag, guess what you can't do? Reload to proc Voltshot. A much better option here is triple tap. 1 round refunded for every 3 precision shots landed. So this perk not only has the potential to increase your magazine size, but it's also refunding ammo, not just reloading ammo. And since trace rifles are generally used as a special ammo primary weapon, it makes the ammo economy much less of a pain point. The other perk that I do like in this column is Adaptive Munitions. This perk works fantastic on trace rifles for burning down unmatched enemy shields in higher level content where the match game modifier is turned on. But in just a few short weeks with the release of Lightfall, the match game modifier is going to be retired. So I really can't speak on the overall value of the perk when that change takes place. But at least for now, for the remainder of this season, Adaptive Munitions could be a really nice choice. And do you need to spring for the enhanced perks for Voltshot or Triple Tap? Not really. You get about an extra second to use Voltshot once the perk is primed, and Triple Tap extends the duration window between precision shots by about half a second. There are situations where each can be beneficial, but if you don't want to burn the Ascendant Alloy, don't sweat it. But moving on, in terms of damage, what is Path of Least Resistance packing? Well, Crit vs. Carl is scoring 1,655 points of damage. So without taking any of the perks into account, with its baseline 96 round magazine, that's 158,880 points of potential damage with all crits. The time to empty comes in at 6.33 seconds, putting the damage per second at 25,100, which, admittedly, for a special weapon, isn't great. But those are just the base results. If we bring Triple Tap into play, and assume that we are perfect on our crits, that 96 round magazine actually gets turned into a 143 round magazine. Now at a glance you might look at it like, okay, 1 round back for every 3 crits landed, that's an additional 32 rounds, 128 rounds are fired before the weapon empties. But what you need to account for is those shots that are refunded are being loaded back into the magazine. So your refunded rounds are working to refund more rounds. Kind of like compounding interest if you have any of your money invested. The more you make, the more you make. And I did head over to the Spire of the Watcher Harpy boss where it is infinitely easier to land a perfect set of crits just to confirm this. And if you keep a close eye on the ammo counter, it does hit the nail right on the head. Those rounds refunded tick up to 25 and then they reset and climb again up to 22 before the magazine eventually empties. That's 47 total rounds refunded, 47 plus 96, 143. Now this won't move around the damage per second in any meaningful way because we're just sustaining that damage for a longer period of time. But it does move the maximum potential single mag damage versus Carl up to 236,665. If we have Voltshot procced as well though and apply the Jolt to an enemy, versus Carl each hit from that Jolt results in an additional 12,789 points of damage. So with it working alongside Triple Tap, that's 8 potential Jolt procs. And just for peace of mind, I did test this versus the Dungeon Harpy as well, just to make sure there weren't any conflicting numbers. And it does appear that 8 hits of Jolt is the best that we're gonna do. So versus Carl, 8 Jolt hits at 12,789 equates to 102,312 points of additional damage. This is going to move the maximum single mag damage up to 338,977 and puts the single mag damage per second at just under 36,000. A very nice improvement over our baseline numbers. And I do want to point out that that single jolt damage value being applied from Path of Least Resistance comparably is very good. As you may or may not know, not all jolts are created equal. The damage does vary, so I ran you off a few examples here. The jolt damage from an arc grenade with Spark of Shock applied is 6,269. The jolt from Brigand's Law's Voltshot, 9,717. With Tarnished Metal, the jolt's dealing 8,150. Sail Spy Pitch Glass, 12,068. Macabre, 8,150. Dark Decider, 7,523. The Ikelos SMG, 9,592. And out of the batch that I tested, the only weapon that I saw a higher jolt damage value on was the Terminus Horizon Heavy Machine Gun at 15,797. So the jolt from Path of Least Resistance Voltshot definitely packs a punch, and really helps us out in a few different ways. As we already saw in the testing, it is going to up the single target damage on an enemy quite significantly. I mean, you're not going to be melting down ultras with this weapon, it's by no means going to be your primary DPS option, but your chunkier major targets, this weapon can put a hurt on them. And you do have the added benefit of not needing to be right up in their face to apply maximum damage. And then the lightning chaining from the jolt is obviously fantastic for ad clearing. And with the Voltshot from Path of Least Resistance applying a higher damaging jolt than many other weapons, that widens the spectrum of enemies that can drop to a single lightning chain. And if the situation happens to present itself, you can use Path of Least Resistance's Voltshot to supplement boss damage. If you can proc Voltshot and then apply the jolt to the boss, just swap over to whatever weapon you're using to pour on the damage. The jolt's not going to go away just because you stowed your Voltshot weapon. As long as you keep crossing that damage threshold needed to spark the jolt, which I believe in baseline content was around 5,000 or 6,000, those jolt hits are going to continue to roll off the enemy at about 1 second intervals as long as you're maintaining damage up until the status effect expires. And while it may not be a boatload of damage, as I've always said, more damage is better than not more damage. And it's definitely an avenue that can supplement your boss DPS. And if we look to the future a little bit, there are some nice changes incoming that are going to benefit Path of Least Resistance. A current issue that I have with Trace Rifles is their inability to deal with champions. So most of them need to rely on the seasonal artifact to do so. But since they are special weapons and not primaries, they don't pop up in there very often. But when Lightfall releases, subclass verbs will have the ability to stun champions. Applying Jolt will disrupt overload champions, so Path of Least Resistance has us covered there. And if you are using an Arc subclass, you can make use of Spark of Beacons to apply an Arc Blind with Path of Least Resistance. While amplified, Arc Special Weapon Final Blows create a blinding explosion. The Arc Blind effect will work versus unstoppable champions. And while it may not be the most practical way to put a stun on an unstoppable, it is another tool in Path of Least Resistance belt. And if you're worried about using this weapon in endgame level content, I would say don't be. I've taken it into several GMs since they opened up this season, and I was overall very pleased with the results. You put a solid build around this thing, and it will perform. It does its job as a red bar and major clearing weapon just fine. And being a legendary weapon, it's not burning your exotic slot. And it does work very nicely in a double special weapon loadout. So that leaves the door wide open for something like Arbalist or Wither Horde in your kinetic slot. Or if there's an exotic heavy weapon damage dealer that you like to run, it gives you the freedom to do that too. Overall, it's just a very sturdy and reliable workhorse trace rifle that gets the job done. So if you're in the trace rifles in Destiny 2, definitely get your patterns collected for this one before Lightfall rolls in just a few weeks. If you're not in the trace rifles, I honestly can't believe that you made it this far into the video, but thank you. Go spend your time gathering patterns and crafting whatever weapons you like. But hey, I do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to check out this weapon breakdown. You guys are awesome, and I will catch you on the next one.